Welcome to another episode hosted by Circulody CISO, and this time we are going to be talking about the importance of the future, securing the generation to come, the future generations to come. So, to have this conversation, I have an industry professional who also happens to be a father and a CISO with a long list of certifications. To name a few, he's holding a CISSP, CISM, CRISC, CDPSC, and the list is long, as I said. And he is also the CISO for Dialogue Finance PLC. Welcome, Ranit, and we are happy to have you here in our studios, Ranit Dharmaratna. So, to start the conversation, I'd like to ask you, why are you paying attention to the kids' safety online?
Uh, Thank you for having me here. So it's a topic I care deeply about. So I really appreciate the invitation. And yeah, you know, in my professional life, I spend most of my time looking at how systems fail and not dramatic failures, the quiet ones. The tiny gaps don't look dangerous until suddenly they are. But the real light bulb moment didn't happen in a boardroom. So it happened much closer to home. I started noticing it just spending time around kids, the neighbors' kids, the family, the friends' children, and they're incredibly good with devices and way better than we were at that time. And they know how to swipe, search, install, and click, and all of it, and they know how to get it things very swiftly, more than us. And what they don't understand yet is the risk, or the manipulation, or the long-term impact. And to be honest, that's not their job actually. That's ours to explain and get things in the right way. So in Sri Lanka, the pandemic actually accelerated everything overnight, and online education became essential, and that's a good thing. But it also means children were online earlier, longer, and often more independently than parents were ready for. And I'll be honest, so becoming a parent changes how you see systems, and I realized something uncomfortable. I was spending my days protecting millions in financial assets, but the most vulnerable users were actually sitting in our own homes. We didn't realize that actually. So, and I want to say this clearly because parents need to hear it. So, I've seen parents take a phone away at night and quietly hand it back the next morning because they're tired, busy, or just need some peace. And that doesn't make you a bad parent. So it makes you human. So this is really about bridging two worlds and taking calm and structured thinking we used in cybersecurity and also applying it to everyday parenting. So no fear, no guilt, just the clarity. And if you feel like you've already lost the control of screens with your children, don't panic. And in cybersecurity, the prevention matters, but remediation is real too. So it's never too late to reset the digital culture at your home. And this isn't about being a tech expert in the industry. So if you are a whatever the industry that you work in, even if you are a doctor, engineer, or maybe any profession, but when you are a parent, you can do the control properly if you understand it very well, right? So it's about being an intentional one. So that's the way for you to get through this.
Absolutely. You made mention about a couple of things. One is what happened during the pandemic, how it forced people to stay at home, and also it gave a great opportunity for the kids to spend more time online because most of the education were conducted online. So the kids were dabbling between studies, games, streaming, TikTok, for example, were also partly to contribute to their safety concerns as well. The U.S. government, the Congress, also had a long debate on the child safety, especially revolving around the social media platforms. And as we speak, the governments across the world are increasing their attention to child's time online. Australia is one of them, Singapore is another country, and we are also hearing the same tone in Sri Lanka as well. So while the governments are considering various measures, and one of the things which I've also noticed is that the Singapore schools have taken one step further. They've said limit screen time. It's not that they are not going to completely restrict kids from having access to technology, but limit the screen time. So I also want to take this opportunity to mention about ISC2 Center for Cyber Safety and Education. They have been putting together a lot of materials, resources for parents, right? So cyber safety tip sheets and scam info is one of them. They also have resources for mental health resources, financial health resources, and professional resources for professionals like you and me. So if you are looking for information as to how to stay safe and what to do, what not to do, so a good place to visit would be the Center for Cyber Safety. So that's something which I'd like to leave with you. So coming back to Ranit, right? I mean, I'd like to ask you, how is the threat landscape changing and how does it impact the home, the kids, the young adults? What are you seeing?
Yeah, actually, when it comes to the home, actually, parents need to shift their mindset in a better way. So previously, we were thinking that the risk will be coming from the stranger, but nowadays that's getting changed. So the risk comes from nowadays the risk comes from the systems. It's automated and even AI driven, and they are operating at scale. So I often call this the industrialization of the digital harm. So your child is not just choosing a video or a game. So an algorithm designed for the maximum attention is choosing for them. So it's not them who's choosing it based on the videos they watch. The algorithm designs and it defines what are the video you want to watch next. So that's the thing. So those systems don't understand the age, the emotional maturity, or the boundaries. And the main goal is to increase the engagement. So we are also entering in an era of the synthetic content, the AI generated voices, the videos, and even digital companions you see nowadays. So in corporate environments, we already see AI creating perfect phishing messages. And when it comes to children, this means the content that feels friendly, more personal, and trustworthy. But it isn't real. And here's the uncomfortable truth. So the most online harm doesn't happen because the parents don't care. It happens because the platforms are simply designed than the family rules we have. So today, we are not just protecting kids from bad people. So we are protecting them from algorithms and the platforms that were never built with children in mind. So even if you mention the age when you are logging in or creating an account, but the algorithms work in a different way because they want the maximum engagement. So that's the risk that we have more than the previous thing.
I agree with you, right? I mean, recently I was reading a couple of articles, and one of them said that scrolling is a new addiction, which is equivalent to smoking, right? And also, it also affects the mental health of people, not necessarily just the kids, everyone who is addicted to scrolling. So you are in a vivid place. It's just, you're just scrolling. And it also says that it affects the mental health of people, leading to depression as well.
Yes.
So the reason why I like having this conversation with you is that we are basically talking about protecting the future generations, right? Inculcating in their minds what is right or wrong, and more importantly, how to make use of the best available time so that they can be more productive. And I think that's the objective which we are trying to achieve in this conversation. Now, you shared your perspectives as a parent. If you were to wear the CISO's lens, would that conversation change? Let's hear it
Yeah.
from you.
So I would say that will be the same, but the technical terms we can convert it to our home also. We can relate it in a different way, right? So let's say, as an example, the CIA tribe, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So we don't have to be an expert, like I said. So you can use it. So l- as an example, so using CIA for home may look like something more technical, but it's actually very human. I mean, I can simplify it. So if you take the confidentiality, so that's about your child's data, name, the photo, the behavior, or maybe the identity details he's having. So from a security perspective, a child's identity is very clean. I mean, even before you create a Facebook account, you have your child's photographs on your albums and so on. But nowadays, you are posting it on Facebook and on the other online platforms. So this is where you want to be very cautious. And if it is misused today, and you might not see the damage for 10 or 15 years because uh, he starts to work with the society and he's creating his identities when he's grown up. So that's why I ask parents to post before uploading children's pictures into apps. And some apps promise and they say that they will show how your children will look like when they are a teenager, maybe when they grow older. That looks harmless and that looks fun. But those images become biometric data. So if that data leaks, it can be reused long before your child is old enough to protect themselves. So this is kind of harm that creates future regret. So not immediate alarms. You won't notice if it's been misused. So if I may relate the integrity, and that is about the truth and the trust. And we are entering a world where seeing is no longer believing. The deepfakes, the AI generated content can shape what children believe is real. So that's the risk. And if I explain the integrity further, that means teaching your kids to ask simple questions when they see something, when something is requesting their information. So they want to ask, is this real? And why is this being shown to me? And that habit protects them from confusion, not just the content. So if we look at the availability pillar, so that is where the emotions comes in. And the online education is necessary for children. So it's positive. But the availability doesn't mean the unlimited access. It means the purpose-driven access when learning, the entertainment and preset all live on the same screen. Kids burn out and the parents do too. So that's how we can relate things.
Awesome. Like, I mean, when you were talking about your experience, or when you were saying, okay, how CIA comes into play, I couldn't help but laugh, right? I mean, I have gone through the same phase which you're describing. My kids used to join me for meetings and they'd come with me for conferences and they keep hearing about the CIA confidentiality, integrity, availability all the time. And I still remember when my kids were almost 3, 4 years. I mean, 5, I think the eldest was about 6 at that time. And they come back home. They all had access to social media. right? I mean, under supervision. The interesting thing is when my wife asked my son to give the password, and he goes, cannot share. And I had an emergency call from my wife saying, you better talk to your kids. Right? They are refusing to share the passwords. So I had to explain to them, while they have the right to know their passwords, but as children, they are in our custody, right? So they are in our care. So as parents, we have the right to have access to their passwords. And rather than shouting and screaming, I had to tell them in a way that they would appreciate and share that information with my wife. And talking about integrity, right? So that is also important, right? I mean, you talked about, trust is the core issue with respect to integrity. How much do you trust somebody who is online than on the physical world? So one of the questions I always ask the kids when I talk to them, do you know your neighbors? Do you know who's living down the street? And most of the time, they give a very blank look and ask, why are you asking me this? So my question is, you don't know your neighbors, but you know everybody on the internet. But really, can you vouch for that? And I get them thinking on that, right? So one of the things which still holds good, which my parents, my grandparents always told me was, do not talk to strangers. Right? So today we are talking to strangers on the internet. The kids are doing it much more than we do. Anybody there can be anyone for that matter. Right? That is one angle. The second one is, even now my mom, right? I mean, she would always say, be careful when somebody offers you food. Now, how does that translate to the digital world? Right? There are cookies, there are gift vouchers, there are different things they offer in different forms and get people enticed, convinced that they're forced to click on that link or accept that gift. So it's only a bait, right? This doesn't apply only to the kids, it applies to the adults as well, for everyone. And I think the last point which you also emphasized on the availability, I think it is not about banning everything and saying, oh, you don't have access to anything. Yeah, as a kid, I know anything which I was told not to do it, I found ways to get around to it. Yeah, if my dad told me don't ride the cycle, exactly, and I would find the time he's not around to ride the cycle. The only time he would find out, some neighbor, informs him that, I saw your kid, cycling fast, or I had a fall and hurt myself, and he would get to know about it. So I think telling kids no is the right thing to do, but reasoning out with them as to why it is a no and why it is okay with limited access is something I think every parent should spend time explaining as to what is the rationale of their argument.
Exactly.
Right? And I think at some point in time, you need to keep an open conversation for you to know what exactly they are doing. We are, as parents, as professionals, and we are caught up with our own work, right? And sometimes when they want to come and tell us something, we don't pay attention to what they are saying. And then where do they go for comfort? The internet.
Yes.
And who do they find as people who can they trust? That unknown face. Because they are confiding everything to them. Right? So parents, this is something for you to pay attention to. I know we are all busy people. Life is so hectic, but I think it is important to pay attention to what your kids are doing or what they are talking. But restricting them from doing something is only going to aggravate it. Right? And that's what we're hearing from Ranit as well. Right? Moving on. Right? I mean, we keep hearing these buzzwords in the corporate environment. There are different terminologies people use, and the one which has caught all our attention in the last few years is zero trust, right? And some people in some cultures they get offense when you say zero trust. Don't you trust me, right? So I would like to ask you: is that a concept we can practice at our homes? What's your view?
Yeah, exactly. Like you already
Right?
explained, we can relate it with the grandparents' trust, the grandma's trust. Like even let's say your neighborhood is very well known and you know everyone near, but you just don't keep your doors open just because you know the neighbors, right? So you look first, even if
Absolutely.
somebody knocks, you look first. So that's what our grandparents and even our parents do. So we can practice the same thing, and that's what we call the zero trust. And that post, that verification, that's zero trust. So at home, it means we don't assume an app is safe just because it's labeled for kids, and we verify before trusting. So that's what we want to do. And we don't rely on one control. So we use layers like we call the defense in depth. That's another terminology that we use when in the industry. And
Absolutely.
what I can explain is like we can have the devices in common areas and we can schedule our Wi-Fi and we can use education only data packages. I think almost all the service providers in Sri Lanka at the moment is providing the same thing. And also there's no requirement for kids to have admin access on the devices. And even we don't need to save our credit cards and stuff if we are handing over our mobiles to our kids. So we have to double check when we are doing purchases, even to see whether the card is safe. Because in case if my child is using it, so he might accidentally do a purchase. So that's again going to be a bad thing for me also, right? And we need to do the app vetting, which is called the data minimization. And the most important thing is the human mind. Like we need to teach our kids the curiosity, not the fear. We don't want to make them fear and stop doing things just because we say. If they understand the risk, they will definitely pause and question, and then they will not do that. So the safety doesn't come from one app or a one rule. We just can't put a rule and say don't do it. So it comes from layers working together, like I said. We have to do certain checks. And then only we must allow our kids to use certain apps or games.
Absolutely. And I like your analogy about the television, right? Typically televisions are kept in the living room.
Yes.
So everybody gets to see, what's being aired,
Uh,
what's somebody watching, and all that. And I would always say that we when my kids were growing up, even their computers were in the public space. Like it was in the living room. Nothing, nobody could close their bedrooms or anything, right? So it was more of an open environment, right? Respecting everybody's privacy, but there were certain rules which we practice, saying, okay, this is how we practice, or this is what is expected, right? Your grandparents' example is a classic case, comparing grandparents to your neighbors, right? While the grandparents may have more access in your home, whereas the neighbors may not. So be very clear about those boundary lines is very important. And moving on, so you worked in the finance industry for a long time. What do you see as the emerging dangers that potentially could harm not just the kids but also the parents? Do you have any specifics you would want to talk about? Maybe a
yes.
few examples if you can.
Yeah. Sure. Exactly. Um, and all the time, even the banks and also the finance company, the call centers, they're getting panic calls from the customers, and they call it a fraud. And let's say, as an example, someone may see some small charges coming from a gaming platform or an app store. The parents think that they have been hacked or something, but most of the time they haven't. because it's their own child using their saved card on the app, or maybe they have provided access to the cards for them also. So you don't think that he will have, yeah, I mean, someone can guide them to use your credit card on an app or a store. So that's a risk that you want to avoid because you want to educate your children. So most of the time, uh, if you take it from the cybersecurity point of view, that's not an attack. So it's a configuration failure, I would say. The saved card and no confirmation step and real financial access was given to your kids without any safeguard. Even even a child can play with your credit card and debit cards, so they don't know the risk of using it. And even the
Absolutely.
subscriptions also come in the same way. Your child might use some free trials and quietly they convert into paid plans automatically. So that's also a risk that I see when it comes to the banking industry. And in security, we call this a salami attack, which means small amounts taken slowly, unnoticed, and we cannot say that those are parenting failures. Actually, those are design and access problems, and it doesn't stop there. So globally, the law enforcement, I can say the law enforcement in Ireland has already warned that the organized crime networks are recruiting very young people, even at their in 14 years of age, because sometimes as young as 14, right? So to access money mules. So they are contracted through social media and peer pressure and also false promises and asked to move money using their bank accounts. So many don't understand the consequences, but legally the impact is very real. So this isn't about bad kids, and it's about access being given before the maturity, the awareness, and also the controls are in place. So the criminals don't hack systems if they can persuade trust for users to open the door themselves. So that's where the awareness and the things comes in. So when it comes to the banking and financial sector, so these things are getting highlighted always.
Absolutely. So classic examples how kids can become convenient, uh, you know, useful for a bad guy because of their innocence, right?
Yes.
So that's what is the cause for concern right now. Uh, when you look at all these things, like I mean, in every organization in the corporate world, we talk a lot about governance. How would you bring in the governance concept to a home environment?
Yeah. Uh, someone might say then this is like we are overreacting, but it's not. And this is where the parents, even I would say the governments also looking into the same thing. They are also trying to implement controls and they are mostly trying to implement controls on the application vendors likewise. So as an example, like I said, like you mentioned, the Australia also have made introduced the minimum age requirements for social media platforms, placing a responsibility on the platform themselves. And even I came across that the France also moving in a similar way, and even in the Europe, there are active discussions about the age standards and safeguards for children interacting with social and AI systems. So closer to home, even in Sri Lanka, I heard that in Sri Lanka is also recognizing the issue, and there are ongoing discussions about limiting young children's access to social media and managing early mobile phone usage. And we already have laws addressing online harm through the Computer Crimes Act and also the child protection mechanisms, likewise. But when government starts stepping in, it usually means one thing. The risk has grown beyond what individual families can reasonably manage alone. So this is not a panic. So it's a global response to real documented harm. So I think we need to act promptly and like previously I said, our children, they are getting access to digital stuff more than us, and they're born with the digitalization. So that's why we need to implement proper controls. And even the governments, I think almost in the entire world, governments are trying to implement controls and safeguards on kids because of these things.
So finally, are we creating fear in the minds of parents?
No, actually, the fear is not going to take you anywhere. So I want parents to hear this clearly. So you're not late and you're not falling and you're not alone. When I think about the digital safety, whether in banking or parenting, I always look at three things: the intent, the access, and the impact. So we can't always control the intent because kids get curious, the humans make mistakes, even we do, but we can control the access, and that's what reduces the impact. So the technology, I would say, is an enemy, and the curiosity is not an enemy. And even the mistakes the kids do are not the enemy, but the unmanaged risk. That is a risk. So today, don't want about don't I don't want anyone to worry about changing every setting on your applications. Just having a rush. Just ask yourself one question: if this device disappears tomorrow, would my child lose convenience or lose a part of their identity? And because secure human is not someone who stays offline. Now, this is a digital era. So it's someone who has agency. And that's what raising secure human is really about. And yes, I would say if you are scared or being rushed and trying to do changes on your applications or maybe on your laptop or mobile, it's not going to do anything. But you have to be an intentional parent and start understanding your children and their mindset and also apply controls in a proper way. So that's what I have to say.
Yeah, that's awesome. Right? I mean, we spoke about various aspects and from various angles. So my takeaway from this conversation is you repeated the use of word being an intentional parent. Right. So I would also add that we need to be empathetic. We need to be considerate. We need to consider their concerns and be rational about our decisions. Right. While there are so many discussions about age-based restrictions to access social media, it's easy to say that, but enforcement is going to be a challenge because we do not have the framework to enforce it. Extending the same conversation to the adults, right? I mean, there are things which we want to ensure from a privacy perspective, right? So we are at a juncture where we want to ensure that our systems can also cater not just zero trust, but also zero knowledge. Because why I'm talking about the zero knowledge based system is certain authentication mechanism should only validate based on that information with minimal knowledge, but the person who is sitting on the other side of the table, maybe for somebody who's responsible for governance, they really don't need to know who this identity is. Right? So we need to start looking at validating just by binaries so that the systems can be more trusted. So how do we ensure that the governments and organizations build zero knowledge systems where when I log in and try to access that information, and if it meets that criteria, it should grant me access, and if it doesn't meet, it should prevent that access. But the question is, does somebody else need to know that I tried attempting to access that information? Now, for example, where you need to bring in privacy concepts, and I think zero knowledge is the way to go. So with that thought, I would like to thank Ranit for spending your valuable time speaking about uh, the future of the kids, the generations which are yet to come. How do we protect them? And how do we even create an ecosystem for them to securely navigate the digital space? Right. And for the viewers, if you like to connect with Ranit Dharmaratna, he's on LinkedIn. Uh, you can connect with him on LinkedIn, reach out to him, and both of us are credential holders from ISC2. We have a mandate to give it back to the community. So if you want us to come and talk about if you want us to come and talk about the cyber safety and educate your children, teachers, or even the adults, we would be able to make time for same. Thank you so much and see you in another episode.